I took a long drag on a clove cigarette, the last of the bad habits I'd allowed myself. Well, unless you counted my fashion sense, which was now mostly reduced to wearing heavy boots with office casual wear. Both were relics of when I was a goth, a fun phase of my college life and early adulthood. I loved the music and the aesthetic, especially in the way girls dressed, but I never liked angst, especially after meeting Ellie. I met Ellie during the worst time of her life, a particularly bad time in her life. She had a long streak of bad luck that started before she was even born. Her mother, Gloria, was a drug addict, abusive when she was around but mostly absent. In her place, she was raised by her father, Don, a high school English teacher. Gloria trapped Don in the trap of childhood. He was working on his master's thesis in linguistics when he had the misfortune to fall in love with her pretty face and wild personality. She got pregnant with Ellie, and Don decided to do the right thing. It cost him almost everything: a promising career, a chance at a faithful wife, his health, and his self-respect. The only thing he's gained is Ellie. He considers it a more than fair exchange. When are you going to stop smoking those things? I don't want you to get lung cancer, baby. I heard her pleasant voice behind me on the balcony. I wasn't allowed to smoke inside. You made me quit drinking and pot. You've already increased my life expectancy enough, Elle. I put out my cigarette and turned to her. Sue me. I'm greedy. I want to spend as many years with you as possible. She lifted up on her tiptoes and kissed me. I like the taste of you after you smoke them. I have a little time before I have to be at a doctor's appointment. I'd love to let you taste me again. She bit her lip. Another time, sweetheart? I think I would have tired you out last night. I need to go to the store. I put my arms around her and kissed her again. If you ever tire me out enough that I can't have another round with you the next morning, let's see if I'll be a pod person. She pulled away and I slapped her ass. I suddenly remembered. Do you want me to sign you up for a physical while I'm at the doctor's office? She looked up. No. Thanks, but things are all mixed up at work right now. I don't know when I can go. She grabbed her keys and headed for the exit. I have a long shift today, honey. I'll see you tonight. I enjoyed watching her gait. She was shorter than me in height like most people, but she was so graceful, and the flowing skirts and peasant blouses she favored always made me smile. Where I looked like what I was, a corporate IT girl losing the battle to retain a modicum of individuality, she always looked like she'd stepped out of Haight-Ashbury in the late 60s. I smiled as I drove to the physical. Last night had been great. Ellie had been very affectionate the last couple months, and in fact she was always affectionate. I knew there would be a downturn in that soon. It had been the order of the day for almost as long as I'd known her. Sometimes I worried that she might be manic-depressive, but she didn't like the thought of being on medication. It wasn't a big change, and her slumps only lasted a few weeks, but I worried about her. I guess that was the order of the day. I was usually worried about her. Like I said, I met Ellie at a particularly difficult time in her life. She'd had a rough childhood. Her father, who was always trying to make ends meet and was therefore often absent, and her best friend Derek were the only bright spots in her life. Derek was from the next street over. He'd had a similarly difficult childhood, and they'd bonded over it. They were friends, then dated when they moved on to high school. They were each other's first, and Ellie thought they'd be together forever. But Derek was of a different opinion. He was a very talented guitarist and not a bad singer, and a pretty good songwriter. When they were in their 20s, he had to choose between Ellie and his dream, and he chose his dream. She took it pretty hard. While Derek was eager to hit the road, Ellie wanted to settle down, have a home and a family. She longed for the stable life she hadn't had growing up and hoped that Derek would eventually decide he needed that too. When that didn't happen, she fell into a deep depression. Ellie was smart, received an academic scholarship, and dove headfirst into her studies. She loved poetry and composing, and was working on her English degree at the time I met her. It wasn't a very pleasant introduction. I was a fun-loving goth trying to pass my computer science exams and partying too much, and she was a diminutive, depressed hippie girl trying to get over her first breakup. We ran into each other on campus, literally. I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. Truth be told, I was hungover from the night before, and I tried to keep my head down to get as little light in my eyes as possible. She was distracted by a text message and we crashed into each other. She got the worst of it, dropping her books and laptop on the floor. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Watch where you're going, asshole. I held out my hand. She grinned, but took it. We started packing up her stuff. Her books were fine, but when she tried to turn on her laptop, it didn't work. Damn it, I can't afford to fix it. Why the hell didn't you watch where you were going? Why the hell didn't you look? I, I, she started to cry. I'm not good at showing emotion. I'm pretty reserved in my joys by default, but that's mostly because demonstrative displays of emotion make me uncomfortable. It wasn't easy for me growing up. My family are loud people with big voices, big opinions, and big feelings. I often wondered if I was adopted, but I looked like a younger version of my father, so it was pretty unlikely. Hey, 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 it's okay. We'll fix it. How? I can't afford this, I just said that. Are you going to pay for it? Here. I took the laptop from her. Let's go find a place to sit down and I'll look at it. Inside the student union, I found a relatively clean desk and began to examine it. The case wasn't cracked, the screen was fine, there was no obvious damage. I pulled the battery out and put it back in. Nothing. What are you doing? Troubleshooting. IT guy. Give me a minute. I pulled out my multi-tool and started removing the case. Hey, hold on, don't break it. I sighed. Listen, what's your name? Ellie. Ellie, great. And I'm Tim. This will go a lot faster if you don't yell at me. This isn't the first laptop I've repaired. I held out a tenner. Why don't you get us a couple drinks? I'll have a Mountain Dew. She hesitantly took it and walked away. While she was gone, I got down to business. I opened the case and discovered the problem pretty quickly. A cable had come loose from the motherboard. I fixed it, put the case back in place, and started the unit. By the time she came back with her drinks, the device was already on the lock screen. Ta-da! I turned the screen to face her. Oh my god, really? Her relief was palpable. Everything should be fine now. It was just a cable disconnect. I finally had a chance to really look at her. She was beautiful. Tense, but beautiful. We were strangely similar, both light-skinned with blonde hair. She had green eyes and I had blue eyes. No one would have mistaken us for siblings, but cousins? Quite possibly. Oh, thank God, she exhaled. I'm sorry I yelled earlier. I've had a few bad months. I shook my head. No, it's okay. I should have been more careful. I tried to think of a way to get her to stay and talk. I didn't know much about her other than she was pretty, but it was college and I was a guy. That was enough to get me started. Well, I guess I should too. She smiled and went to get up. Wait, here. Let me text you my number, just in case there's a problem later. Great, Tim. She raised an eyebrow but still gave me her number. I guess I didn't look too bad. It was college and she was a girl and that was enough for her. It's not exactly a love story for the ages, but we started chatting, then became friends, then friends with benefits, then lovers, and so on down the chain until we got married a couple years after we met. We were a fun couple, the happy goth and the moping hippie, but the longer we were together, the less she moped. A few months after we started officially dating, I met her father, and he thanked me for being a stabilizing influence on her. After dinner, Don took me aside and confessed, I haven't seen her this happy in a long time. She's finally starting to think about the future in a positive way again, and I can't thank you enough for that. I ended up becoming close to him too. By the time we were married, he started calling me son, which was very nice. He was feeling the same emotions as I was, and in some ways, I felt more kinship with him than I did with my real family. After we were married, I started calling him Daddy. Ellie was his only child. He was thrilled. I eventually started my corporate career in information technology as a humble network technician. There was a good starting salary, and Ellie and I had limited needs, so she was able to stay in her college job at a real, honest-to-goodness physical bookstore. She loved paper books, vinyl records, and all the other media that survived mostly through nostalgia and stubbornness. Her schedule was constantly changing, but we still found plenty of time to be together. During the time we were a couple, her attitude towards Derek changed. At first, she couldn't talk about him at all. That was fine with me. No guy likes to hear about his girlfriend's ex. But over time, her attitude softened. It started to find success, mostly at the indie, small label level, but eventually, it started getting airplay. The music industry finally returned to the singer-songwriter with a guitar backing band concept. One day we were listening to the radio in the car and it came on. I wanted to turn it off, but she made me leave it on. She took my hand and kissed it. It's okay. Derek finally got his dream and I got mine. I'm glad he's happy. Recently, we had talked about having kids. We had been married for almost 5 years. I had been promoted to a leading role, and it might soon be time to take the boots off. We were financially stable and wanted to have kids while we were still young enough to chase after them. Ellie had stopped taking the pill. We hadn't tried it, but we hadn't tried it either, and it had been 4 months. I talked to the doctor about it at my physical, and he advised me to get more tests. Just blood drawn at one of the diagnostic centers that specialize in that for now, rather than the more interesting stuff when it comes to infertility. I had a free morning, so I headed to the nearest cafe, which was a few miles away. By the time they were done teasing me, it was nearing lunchtime, and there was a new cafe nearby that Ellie and I had been wanting to visit for a while. I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I was about to enter the restaurant when I saw Ellie and Derek, and they were kissing. I thought I was out of my body. That can't be right. Someone must be playing me, pranking me, pranking me, pranking me, pranking me, pranking me. One of those stupid YouTube stunts. My wife couldn't. Oh God. I jerked back as if I'd been hit. I shook my head. I had enough sense to pull out my phone and take a few pictures, then I stepped back, numb with shock. I walked half a block, turned a corner, and slumped down on a bench at the bus stop. I couldn't think. My mouth was dry and I felt like I was going to throw up. An elderly woman saw my condition and seemed to ask if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. She could have spoken Swahili if that would have helped. I texted my boss and let him know I wasn't feeling well. I had eaten something. I somehow made it to my car. I couldn't drive yet because I knew I was going to have an accident. Suddenly, I discovered the value of big emotions. I started screaming with rage, pounding on the steering wheel, screaming about this cheating whore and her douchebag boyfriend. I screamed and screamed and screamed in pain until I was hoarse. Then the tears came. How could she do that? Why did she do that? He left her. I was there for her, but why? Why? I put my head on the steering wheel and cried until I couldn't take it anymore. Then, devoid of colors, I started the car and drove back to our apartment. I packed a bag, not mine, hers. My name was on the lease. I paid all our bills. We had no children. And I would never touch her again. It was over between us. I thought about having a beer, but the damn thing made me give up alcohol. In the morning, I remembered her rambling, "Honey, I want to spend so many more years with you." Yeah, so you can cheat on me while you're having fun with your ex. Or, I guess not your ex anymore. I didn't know when she'd be back, just late. I couldn't be here anymore. Back in high school, I loved running, loved gym, loved martial arts. Another atypical thing for a goth? I hadn't practiced any of them in a while, but now I just needed something to do. Something physical to take my mind off my emotions. I pulled my old sneakers out of my closet, changed into shorts and a t-shirt, and just started running. I was out of shape. But I was probably also in dissociation, a fugue state where you can make your body do so much more than usual because you've lost touch with yourself. I didn't know exactly how long I had been running or how far. I had the muscle memory to know how to run at a pace that would allow me to go as far as possible, but I didn't realize where I was running or why. When my body finally conveyed to my brain that a breakdown was inevitable, when my lungs were burning, my muscles were flaming with lactic acid, and I just couldn't go any further, I slumped against the wall of a building in an unfamiliar part of town. And just stopped. Stopped running, stopped thinking, stopped mattering in any way. After an indeterminate amount of time, my brain finally turned on. It was starting to get dark. I had no idea where I was. There were no familiar landmarks or recognizable businesses on the buildings, and I had abandoned my marathon far enough away from any street signs to see them in the twilight before the streetlights came on. Whoever says you can't run from trouble just didn't try hard enough. The super smart IT guy finally remembered he lived in the 21st century. I pulled out my phone and checked the map app. Jesus, I walked almost 7 miles before I fainted. It's amazing what existential dread can drive you to. And then, oh hell, yeah, it was my legs. I rose to my feet with a groan, feeling tired and sore and blistered. Uber. Yes. I would take an Uber. My driver Amir and I stopped at the grocery store on the way to my apartment, and I bought us both dinner. Just a sandwich and chips, but still. Being a gig worker sucked, and I wasn't going to have kids, so why not buy the dude a sandwich? I had the money. I grabbed the wrapper too. Amir saw that I screwed up, and he was dealing pot on the side, so score. Hustle culture won. On the way out, I scrolled through my messages. Oh, how nice. Ellie let me know she's going to be late. I wonder what she's up to, probably crashing at work, or piling into work, or on the desk, on that asshole's couch, on our bed. God damn it. Once I got to my complex, I dragged my exhausted body up the stairs, trying to tread carefully as my body screamed at me for the abuse I'd caused. It was pretty slow going, but I was starting to get the hang of it. It turned out that the turtle had lost the most important race. Aesop would have been disappointed. Damn it! I sank down onto the couch. For the first time in almost 5 years, I was drinking beer with dinner. And it was delicious. It was beer water. And it was still the best thing I'd tasted in the last 100 years. The flavor was reminiscent of the senseless rebellion of drinking poison to mess with my wife. I liked it. I smoked a joint at my new dealer and, huffing and puffing, fell into temporary bliss. About 2 hours later, Ellie came in, sniffing the air. Is that grass? Jesus, Tim, what are you doing? What happened to you? I didn't have time to change into sweaty clothes. I was tired, beat up, smelling bad and slightly tipsy. Also, goddamn stoned. Amir's shit was good. It's like this, the usual. How was your day? She was really making it hard for me to relax. Tim, you're freaking me out. What's going on? Ding, 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 ding. Here comes the gong. Time to start the fight. Tell me, Ellie, how long have you been having sex with Derek? She turned white as a sheet and began to stutter. I think your starter is jammed, Ellie. Do you want to take a second to figure out exactly how you're going to lie to me and start over? Damn, I should argue with upper management more often. She started frantically thinking, her mouth opening and closing. I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app, then dropped it at her feet. Let's just skip the lying part, Ellie. I stopped by the coffee shop to see if I could get you a date. I snorted with amused indignation. Looks like it? I looked at the floor. For how long? Tim, it's not. I was on my feet in an instant, adrenaline and rage overriding the red warning signals my body was giving my brain. I was in her face, sputtering saliva with rage. How long, Ellie? She pulled away from me and began to cry. 2 months? I just shook my head. 2 months? Well, that's just cruel. Her voice timid as a mouse. This time? This time. This time. Time. 2 syllables. 8 letters. And that's all it took to destroy my world. My brain started putting it all together all at once. Derek was a touring musician. Ellie had been in a tense state for 2 months now. She fell into this mode sporadically, 2 or 3 times a year, a month or 2 at a time. This would be followed by a slump for a week or so. It went on like this until, oh God, even before we got married. I don't know if it was the overwork, the beer, or just the sudden shattering of reality as I knew it, but I couldn't stand on my feet anymore. Jesus, Ellie, Jesus. I squeezed past her into our bedroom, trying to get there before my legs gave out. I managed it with difficulty, falling to the edge of the bed and wrapping my arms around my head. 6 years. 6 years you've been cheating on me? Why? Why? We got married, Elle. You married me. The tears flowed with renewed vigor, stronger than before. It was one thing to think my wife had fallen out of love with me. It was quite another to find out that she had never loved me at all. She followed me into the room and knelt down in front of me, trying to catch my gaze. Because I love you, Tim, I still love you. You're the best man in the world. I started laughing. I couldn't hold back. Tears rolled down my face as I choked with laughter. I couldn't even say anything back. Her voice became more insistent. Please, Tim, please, I mean it. You're the best man I've ever met. You make me feel safe and loved. Please, I need you to... And that's when I snapped. I need you out of my life. You're a worthless, cheating bitch. Stop standing here lying to me. Get your bag and leave. She gasped and reached for me. What, Tim? No, I'm not leaving you like this. I don't want you to hurt yourself. I batted her hand away, and she rolled to her knees and fell on her ass. I'd never raised my hand to her before. I'd never raised a hand on a woman at all. Hell, unless you counted martial arts in high school, I hadn't hit anyone since I went into 4th grade. Shit, Elle, I'm sorry. I stopped. No, damn it. I shouldn't have hit you, but you shouldn't have tried to touch me. Did you think you'd get away with it? That I'd still want you after that? How big of a slut are you, Ellie? I'm not a slut. Anger suddenly flashed in her eyes. She pulled back. I was too stunned to block her path. This was Ellie. She couldn't even kill a bug. She always took a piece of paper and put them outside. I felt her hand slap my cheek, a loud, sincere slap. The gloves were off. I'd never touched her before tonight, but it looked like it was going to be a good night. Adrenaline rushed back into my head, even as the warning lights in my head started flashing from red to black. I grabbed her arm. She stumbled, but I just dragged her along behind me, grabbing her suitcase on the way out of our bedroom. Our bedroom. What a joke. Tim, please, stop. I wasn't the strongest guy, but Ellie was tiny and scared. She was struggling, but she didn't have a chance to fight back. We got to the front door and she started to beg. No, Tim, no, please, please, please. I'm sorry, I love you, please. We need to talk, baby. Don't even try. My voice turned into a roar, and she recoiled back like prey trying to escape a predator. I was Tim, her baby, her love, her plush toy. She didn't recognize the man she saw. Good. She was beginning to understand how I felt. I opened the apartment door and tossed her the suitcase. Our neighbors were already starting to pop their heads out. I pushed her inside. She stumbled and fell to her knees. I grinned, looking at her standing in the doorway. You'll get the rest of your shit later. Have your dad call me. I'll make arrangements with him. I don't want to see your face or hear your voice anymore. Tim, wait, my purse. It was lying by the door. I grabbed it, opened it, and pulled out my keys, then threw it at her. Not at her, but at her. But my keys, I paid for it. She's titled in my name. She's not yours anymore. But how am I going to get to my father? Damned insolence. Call your dad, call your boyfriend, call a cab. Hell, try haggling on the corner for bus fare, whore. I don't care. I slammed the door shut. I slid the deadbolt as she pounded on the door, begging me to let her inside so we could talk, begging me to give her the keys, begging me to give her someone she never really appreciated. I slammed the door shut, grief rising in me. Shame for letting my emotions leave me, for the rage that almost... God, I almost hit her. In that moment after she slapped me, I almost hit her. I didn't want to be that person. I began to grieve anew, not only for the loss of my love, but for the loss of my self-esteem. All the warning lights in my brain went black. The instrument readings changed from high to low. I couldn't stay upright, even sitting up. My body rolled over on its side, and I fell asleep to the sound of the most important person in my world banging on the door and crying. Beep, 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 beep. Where? Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Why does everything hurt? Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Allie. Oh my God. 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 I slowly got up and sat up. My neck and back hurt like I'd been in a car accident, and my legs were shot through. But my hands were still working. I managed to pull my phone out of my pocket and turn off the alarm. There were text messages from Ellie, of course, and from Dawn. Dawn was full of concern for me. It was very touching. Some of the fathers started pestering me about how I had hurt their daughter, but Dawn just wanted to make sure I was okay. But I think he went through the same thing. Ellie asked for almost everything. Some anger about being kicked out, but mostly requests. Please talk to me. Please don't do anything rash. Please don't hurt yourself. Please don't leave us. It's getting a little late, Elle. I was going to be late for work. It was a given at this point. Limping, I made my way to the bathroom and stripped off my clothes. She reeked of sour sweat and weed. So did I, for that matter. I peed in the shower and washed myself thoroughly, then brushed my teeth. My jaw ached where Ellie had hit me. The guy looking back at me from the mirror looked like Ed Norton from Fight Club, who had just gotten into a fight with his boss. I hope it doesn't happen today, but the week was full of surprises. I arrived at work almost half an hour late. I could barely walk. I looked like I had been mugged, and I was ashamed to be so hurt. My manager Al came over to my desk to see why I was late, but recoiled at the sight of me. Jesus, Tim, what happened? Few things are more humiliating than collapsing on your desk at work, but most of them have happened to me in the last 24 hours. Al had given me the rest of the week off. He was a decent guy and already divorced. In his office, he sympathized with me. He'd caught her in bed with a guy 10 years younger and 50 pounds lighter than him. At least you don't have kids, Tim. I know that's no consolation right now, but you can just cut her out of your life. Patting me on the back, he sent me off into a world of doing nothing. It was the middle of the week and the middle of the day. All my friends had work to do. My body was wrecked with running and grief. I was trying to figure out where to go. I had no appetite. I was too distracted to enjoy a movie. I hadn't yet reached the day drinking stage. There was no way I could repeat yesterday's run, and with the way I felt now, I wouldn't be able to in a week. I sat in the car and procrastinated until I finally came to terms with the fact that the only place I needed to go was home. I started researching divorce in our state. We had no children, no assets, and no real estate. It was a community property state, so she would likely get one of the cars, all her books and records, clothes, and half the cash in our account. Maybe some alimony. Whatever. It was a good deal to get rid of her. Hell, I could start the paperwork myself. I sat down on the couch and started flipping through Netflix, looking for something entertaining enough to distract myself, but not so good that I wanted to ruin my memory by watching it while I was still so upset. I hadn't decided anything yet when I heard a knock on the door. I was expecting to see Ellie, or maybe Dawn. I opened the door and Derek said, "Dude, I'm sorry, this isn't how I wanted to meet you." My fist clenched and I started to feel rage, but then I just couldn't. I was so tired, exhausted. It was another insult thrown on a pile of insults, and I was crushed under the weight of them. This asshole with a neck tattoo and messy black hair that must have taken half an hour to style was a pickle in the shit sandwich of my life. All I could do was laugh. "Can I come in? I think we need to talk." I was still laughing, and that's what made me twitch. This is what my life had come to. We were on the third floor. The stairs were open, and it was only 20 feet away. I thought, why not just pounce on him? You've got half a foot and 30 pounds in you. The other one said, you could just jump over it. The last one, the craziest, said, "You've been on this ride many times before. Why don't you see where it goes? Invite him along. You can always kill him later." I just turned my back to him, still laughing, and invited him in. He reluctantly walked in and sat down in a chair while I plopped down on the couch. "Okay, asshole. You think we need to talk. And I think you just walked into the apartment of the man whose wife you entertained, and he's standing between you and the door. So you better say something really worthwhile or you're going to fly out the window." Derek wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. I think he was the kind of guy who really felt everything. The kind of guy who understands how hard it is, brother. Who feels your pain. He was counting on his contrived soulfulness to get him through it, just like she probably helped him get into his girlfriend's underpants. My girlfriend's underpants. He sighed. "You're mad. I understand." I snorted. "Oh, you understand now? Do you realize how angry I am that my wife cheated on me with you before we were even married? That I'm just finding out about this now? That I've wasted almost my entire adult life with some slut who has fun with a Jack White knockoff when my back is turned? Oh, but I guess only when you come back from tour. So the rest of the time it goes to me. Lucky me." He threw me a pained look. "Yeah, dude. Yeah. You're lucky. You can have her in your life all the time. I'll never have that." I snorted. "Well, you can start right now, Derek. She won't be in my life anymore, so you can take her off my hands." "Oh, wait, you already have." He bowed his head. "No, I can't take her out of your hands. Even if you were done with her, and I don't think you are. I don't care what you think, asshole. Even if you were done with her, I can't take her away from you, kid. She'll never leave you. You're the man she needs. I think that even if you can't get her back, she'll never be with anyone else." "Good, entertain her." He looked at me. "I know you're hurting. I know we hurt you, baby. I'm sorry for that. I wish we hadn't. But please don't take your anger at my weakness out on her." "Your weakness? What the hell does that mean?" He looked out the window, the same one I'd threatened to throw him out of. "When I left Ellie, it was the hardest thing I had to do. I loved her. I don't think I'll ever love another person as much as I loved her, but I loved my dream more. I always wanted to perform on stage, play guitar, and sing. And at first, that was all I wanted to do. I roared, "Good for you. Get to the part where you decided to ruin my life." He nodded. Ellie was my muse. I knew that. But I hoped that the memory of her in my heart, the pain I felt when I left her, maybe that would be enough to inspire me. For a while it was. But then it stopped. After we got back from the second tour, I started trying to write new songs, but nothing was coming out. I just couldn't, man. Ellie wasn't around. He lowered his head. I wasn't going to. I knew I couldn't be what Ellie needed, but I hoped I could be her friend. I went to see her at the bookstore. She was so mad at me, and I knew I deserved it. But I apologized for leaving her the way I left her. Not for dumping her. We both knew that was a lie. But for doing it so suddenly. And anyway, you know Ellie. I snorted derisively, but he ignored me. She's so kind, so forgiving. We went out for coffee so we could talk. To talk, of course. I rolled my eyes. He looked at me. It was just a conversation, dude. I promise. She told me about you, about how you made her happy. She was sure you were the one. I shook my head. No, dude, I'm not fooling you. I knew that look in her eyes. It was love. She felt it for me, but I knew it paled in comparison to what she felt for you. You... I saw tears in his eyes. You were going to give her everything I couldn't. I was so happy for her, man. His voice cracked. So jealous of you. You were supposed to be her fairy tale. And I was just the guy who couldn't keep her. There was contempt in my voice. Get away from me with your pity party and get down to business. He nodded. After that, I came home and was able to write again. Really write. The songs were good, better than the ones I wrote when Elle and I were together. But I was starting to run dry again. I called her and asked if we could talk some more. At first, she didn't want to. She didn't want you to worry about her. Man, I had a great time entertaining her the first time I left. I know that. I know you were picking up the pieces, man. She didn't want to put you through that again if I dumped her as a friend. That's why she didn't tell you about us dating at first. We started by meeting for a cup of coffee. Then she came to my house to listen to new songs. Then we had a few drinks and, yeah, no, I get it. Then you entertained my girlfriend. Or was she my fiancé by then? He looked away. Not yet, no. She was so guilty afterward. She wanted to run straight to you and tell you everything, but I convinced her not to, told her it would kill you. It's my fault. Everything. Especially what happened afterward. There was suffering written all over his face. Real suffering. The guy looked frankly too stupid to be a decent actor. I knew I needed her. Needed my muse, yes, but I needed her in my life. I didn't realize. I convinced myself I could do without her as long as I had my music. But I couldn't. I was greedy. I wanted to have everything. A week later, I went to see her again at the bookstore. I played her the songs I'd written after we... He couldn't look at me. God help me, I tricked her. Convinced her that as long as she was with you, as long as she could be with you, she could still be my muse. That we could still be together sometimes, that she could still help me write. We'd done so much for each other when we were younger, given so much to each other that it just made sense. For her. For both of us. She felt guilty at first, but, it became normal, you know? It had nothing to do with, if you finish that sentence, I'll break your damn neck. It was said coldly, without emotion. And it was the absolute truth. He stopped and nodded. Yeah, you're probably right. It sounds like nonsense to me too. But we've convinced ourselves it's true. I convinced her of it. It seemed that way because nothing happened. You didn't find out. The world didn't explode. It was just the way our lives worked out, and you were both happy. I was happy too. But it was a shitty thing to do to you. It was a shitty thing for me to do to you, man. But please don't punish Elle for it. I laughed again. Punish her. Like I'm punishing her for staying out after curfew. She freaking cheated on me, dude. Horror suddenly appeared on the horizon of my mind. Did you even use protection? I hadn't even thought about it until that moment. My brain was too focused on the pain to think logically. Oh shit, I should have gone for the test. He paused. First, I missed how she felt. I told her I'd be celibate for the last month on the road. I'd take a test when I got back. Make sure you were safe. She insisted on it. That was years ago. We were so far apart that, it seemed normal. He spread his hands, as if in those empty outstretched palms I could find answers as to why my wife had allowed a touring musician to enter her. Oh my God. I would have thrown up if there was anything in my stomach. Get out. Just get out of my house. I stood up. I had plenty of time to rest to let my batteries recharge. The anger was coming back. Wait, dude, please, I'm begging you. Don't punish Ellie because of me. I've known her since we were kids. I knew what buttons to push, how to play on her sympathies. I'm the bad guy here. I am the bad guy. I know that. But please, please. I'm begging you, man. You're her dream. You're a good guy. You're her good guy. She's always called you that. The finest man I've ever met. Please don't take that away. Please don't take your love away from her. It will kill her. He started to half stand, but I had already grabbed him by the collar. I pulled him to the door and threw him over the threshold. I was good at that. Tell that whore I'll bring her the papers for her signature soon. I slammed the door in his face. Back on the couch, I just stared at the ceiling. I still loved her. She was a real bitch. Now I hated her. I never thought I could hate her. But I loved her. If she had told me about it, if she had come to me before I found out, if she had confessed and cried and apologized and begged, maybe I would have gotten over it. But this, finding out like this, oh God, I needed someone to talk to. Someone other than her and that asshole. Someone other than my big, noisy family. Someone who'd been through it. Someone who knew everyone involved. Someone I could rely on, if not impartial, then fair. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove off. Hey, son. Don enclosed me in a tight, loving hug. I started to cry and he held me at arm's length. Hey now, it's going to be okay. We'll figure this out. He led me into his house. He had already made coffee and poured me a cup, creamy and sugar-free, just the way I liked it. When I was a goth, I would have said, pale and bitter, just the way I like my women. That all changed when Elle came along. I fell in love with her cuteness when she stopped being gloomy. Though she may have been getting her sugar from elsewhere for a long time. We sat at his kitchen table, the same one I'd sat at with him when Ellie introduced us. I asked for her hand in his, too. It might be old-fashioned, but he appreciated the gesture. I sat for a while, gathering my thoughts. He gave me the freedom I needed, but he was always there as a comforter. Finally, I was ready to talk. He'd talked to Ellie, knew I'd kicked her out, knew why, what she'd done. But he didn't have the details. I told him everything I'd learned from that asshole. He only shook his head sadly. I thought I raised her better than that. I'm sorry, Tim. You deserved better. He took a deep breath. Have you decided what you're going to do yet? I took the glass and thought for a long moment. No, I'm incredibly angry. I hate her, but I still love her. But I don't think that's enough. I can't trust her anymore. He was thoughtful. I don't know. No, I understand why you look at me like that, but... He raised his eyes to the ceiling. Ellie is not Gloria. I know you came to me for advice, but I want to start here. Gloria has always been a snake. I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but she was. He looked at me seriously. Gloria was a drug addict. She cheated me, ripped me off, trapped me in a marriage because she needed someone she could use and abuse. She never loved me. Ellie's not like that. I know that's hard for you to understand right now, but she's not. He paused, trying to decide if he should tell me what I needed to know. Then he nodded to himself. Son, I love you. I'm going to tell you something that not many people know. Ellie is not my daughter. Not my biological daughter, anyway. She's sandy blonde, like me, and otherwise looks a lot like her mom. I just assumed that even when I found out Gloria cheated on me. I didn't find out until I was 8 years old when she was in a car accident. They tried to determine her blood type, and there's no way it could be mine. It's biologically impossible. Oh my God, Don, I'm so sorry. He smiled good-naturedly. Thank you. It hurt at the time, but by then I realized it didn't matter. She's my baby. I'll always love her. DNA is just DNA. It doesn't make us who we are, not really. It's just part of who we are, and how we're raised is what's most important. I've always believed that. Don's voice broke off. And I'm sorry, son. I didn't raise her right. I know she's a sweet girl. She's loving and smart, wouldn't hurt a fly. Deep down, she knows right from wrong. But she's always been a little gullible, too trusting. And Derek, the pain on his face was obvious. I never disliked him. He was a good friend to her, and they supported each other when I couldn't raise her the way I needed to. It made her dependent on him. And when they started dating, I knew he would break her heart. I was secretly glad when he did. I thought she would be free of him. I recognized his type. He's not such a bad guy. I snorted derisively. I'd like to see who you think is bad if you think he's not. He frowned. Not at me, but at himself for not keeping Derek away from his daughter. He's weak. He's a weak boy who thinks he's a man. He's needy, artistic. There's nothing wrong with being artistic. I teach English, and I know that art is one of the highest aspirations of mankind. But he's gotten it into his head that he needs the worship that comes with art, not the joy of it. I understand that. No one likes to think he's shouting into the void. But it has made him selfish. He thinks the world owes him. He furrowed his brow. I want you to think about your conversation with him. How much of it was about Ellie? Really about Ellie? And how much of it was about him? I ran through the entire conversation in my head as best I could. It was mostly all about him. About how it was all his fault, that he couldn't have her, that he manipulated her. He apologized and asked me to take her back, but it was all just about him and what he did. I assumed it was being done so I wouldn't blame her, so I'd blame it all on him. Don frowned. That makes sense. The guy has a bit of a martyr complex. It has to do with ego. Everything good that happens is because of him. And everything bad that happens is because of him, too. Like I said, a boy, not a man. He took a deep breath before continuing. I'm not going to try to tell you what to do. That's up to you. But I will say that I think you can trust Ellie. Derek is a manipulator. I think she already knows how badly she screwed things up. I know she loves you. What she did to you was awful. But I know she loves you very much. Anyone who sees you two together can see that. I wouldn't call you son if you were just her husband. You deserve it for being the best man you could be to her. And I want you to know that even if you can't stay with her, I'll always think of you that way. I started to cry. Thank you, Daddy, I couldn't speak. Emotions robbed me of my voice. And he patted my shoulder. If Ellie leaves him, I don't think she'll ever fall under his influence again. And no one but you has as much influence over her as he does. He looked away and said quietly, sadly, including me, I suppose. But then he took a deep breath and continued. I can't lie to you. If it were up to me, you'd go to Derek, take her hand, tell her never to see him again, and go back to your old life. See a therapist and find a way to move on. You were so good to her, and I think she was good to you too. But I can't say it's right for you. She's not Gloria, and you're not me. But I will say one thing. People will tell you that you have to forgive her to move on. But that's not quite right. I forgave Gloria so I could stop hating her, so I could try to be a good father to Ellie, but I did it wrong. He took a sip of coffee. I've always loved linguistics. The way words fit together, the way languages evolve, borrowing or discarding fragments from other languages or removing rough edges they no longer need. Sometimes this is a good thing. English doesn't have gendered nouns, so we don't have to deal with LA or L. But we also don't have a second-person plural. You has to fulfill a dual function. So many other words have sprung up to fill that need. Y'all, yous, youans, etc. Language is always imprecise. It is inherently an attempt to convey ideas in a concise form. But that means that in English, we simply don't have words for all the things we need to say. That's why we import words like schadenfreude from other languages. But we don't have, or at least I don't know, a word from another language that we can use in place of forgive for what we're talking about in recovering from the harm people have done to us. Some people use the word accept, but it has its own connotation. None of them are appropriate. I didn't realize this when I was younger. I forgave Gloria in the Christian sense, in the forgive and forget sense. I allowed her back into my life, but I did it without any preconditions. I trusted her, or tried to. When she let me down again, she threw my forgiveness in my face, tried to use it as a get-out-of-jail-free card. She used it as an excuse to continue her bad behavior. and my well-meaning forgiveness led to her dying in her apartment with a needle in her arm. He looked me in the eye. I have no words for what you need to do. Forgive is too slippery a word for that. You need to be able to let go of your anger. I hear you've dealt with it. I started to open my mouth. Don't. You didn't have to do that, and you know it. I know you'll apologize. I also know I did the same thing to Gloria. It was wrong. Our anger doesn't make it right. And you can't hold it in or it will kill you. You might end up hurting people. He paused, shuddering at what he would have to say next. If you can't be with Ellie, you might end up hurting the woman you love next. So yeah, learn to let go of the anger. Forgive her if that works for you. But don't forget or do her any favors for what she did. I hate to say this, she's my child. But she needs to learn from you what she hasn't learned from me. She needs to learn that her actions have consequences, no matter how she has been manipulated. That doesn't mean you need to scorch the earth, but don't take it back without protecting yourself either. Don't be me, son. I nodded. So what do you think I should do next? Don smiled. I think you know. There's only one person in all this that you haven't talked to. Shit. I was hoping you had another option. He stood up and so did I. He put his arm around me. It was always going to come back to you and her, son. There's no avoiding it. I stepped back and texted Ellie. She replied almost immediately, agreeing to meet. But she insisted on meeting at Derek's place and having him there. He was afraid I might hurt her. I hated to admit it, but he was right. I didn't like what it said about me, but I couldn't deny that it was true. If anything went wrong, if feelings flared up, I would hate her now as much as I could. The next morning I found his building. It wasn't as shabby as I expected. I know musicians don't make a lot of money, but it wasn't some firehouse. On the contrary, it was an old warehouse converted into apartments. I knocked on the door of Derek's apartment and Ellie answered me. She was so beautiful. She'd always been like that. My heart melted when I saw her puffy eyes with red rims. She looked like she wanted to hug me. 3 days ago, I would have already enclosed her in my arms, promising to do everything I could to spare her pain. But now, I was the source of her pain as much as she was mine. But not the cause of it, that was on her. And the catalyst for our pain lurked in the room beyond the door. Elle said timidly, "Hi, please come in." She stepped aside without touching me. The room was exactly what one imagines it to be when one thinks of a touring musician's apartment. Cinder block shelves, a coffee table with a spool of cable, milk crates for storage and extra seating. Ratty chairs and a couch, maybe from a thrift store, maybe from a dumpster, brick walls and a bare floor completed the look. I wondered if I'd catch hepatitis just by standing in this room. On the wall hung a whole scattering of guitars, maybe a dozen, and a few more on stands scattered around the room. I knew nothing about guitars and only a little about music in general. I can't hum a tune in a bucket, but I still realized that I had thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars worth of musical equipment in front of me. My host sat at one end of the couch, my wife at the other. I secretly wondered how often they entertained here. When Derek sat down, he gestured to a chair. I thought about obediently staying on my feet, but my legs were still jacking up. I sat down in the uncomfortable shabby chair and decided I should have kept standing. We all looked at each other. This was my meeting, and I decided I should start. I heard what Derek said. I know how I feel at this moment. But Elle, I thought I should give you a chance to speak up. She sighed. I tried to do that when you told me, "No, stop, damn it. You can't play the victim, not in any way. At least not when it comes to anything I've done. As soon as you do, I'm walking out the door and contacting a lawyer. Do you understand?" This was a bad start. I was already pissed off, and she wasn't showing any signs of realizing how screwed up things were. She nodded reluctantly. "I'm really sorry about that. I know I hurt you. I did. But it's been hard for me to admit who I am, what I've done. How badly," she sobbed, "how badly I hurt the best man I've ever known. My husband. She sobbed. I sympathized with her a little, but she started off on the wrong foot. I gave her time to gather her thoughts, and then I said, "Just say what you have to say, Ellie." She took a deep breath. "There's no excuse for what I did. Derek manipulated me, that's the truth." He looked embarrassed, but not as much as he would have liked. But I let it get to that point. I should have warned you right away that I was seeing him. I should have told you when I cheated. Then you would have had a chance to walk away from me if you couldn't let me try to make it up to you. She lowered her eyes. But I can't apologize for marrying you. For cheating on you, yes, it was wrong. And I should have let you know that I cheated on you before I married you, like I said. I should have stopped immediately, but God, I love you so much. You're my everything. Obviously not. She reacted as if I'd slapped her. I wondered if it was kinder than that. You are. Yes, I slept with Derek. And I'm not going to lie, I enjoyed it. I felt grateful to be his muse. He looked at me like you've never looked at me before. I knew he adored me, but he knew he could never again possess me, all of me, like you. I was his unattainable girl, the one he... Don't talk nonsense, Elle. You were quite attainable. I don't want to hear about how sorry you are because it seems like the only thing you really regret is getting caught. I lowered my head. If I hadn't caught you, how long would this have lasted? For the rest of our marriage? Derek said, No, no, dude. Ellie wanted to come clean with you. That's what we talked about at lunch that day. I rolled my eyes and Ellie replied, Yeah, I know you have no reason to believe me, but it was the truth. I was going to tell you about it tonight when I got home. Of course you were going to. That's why he ran his tongue down your throat in the middle of a calf? In broad daylight. Obviously the shame has become too much for you. Why the hell should I believe a word you say? Derek looked encouragingly at Ellie, and she turned her face toward mine. We were ending our relationship. This was supposed to be our last time together. I'm pregnant, Tim. What? What? My head spun. It went from a nightmare to a hellish vision. She nodded. It's been a month and a half. She watched me calculate my thoughts and said quietly, Yes, it could be Derek, but we both hope it's you. I put my head down on my hands, trying to make the room go quiet. I took a few deep breaths, focusing on the floor beneath me, trying to regain my balance. Derek said, Hey, do! Shut up, shut up! Staggering, I rose to my feet. I needed the pace. I needed the pain in my legs to help me focus on the pain in my heart. So what? You were going to come home and say, Hey, baby, I'm warning you. I'm pregnant and probably with the guy I've been dating behind your back for the last 6 years. Did you think it would go better than this? She didn't look at me. I was going to come clean and apologize. I know. I know you're a merciful man, Tim. I'm willing to do anything to make it up to you. And I know you don't want to hurt me, even though I hurt you so horribly. You're so good. Stop telling me how good I am, I shouted. And they both recoiled back. I'm sick to hell of people saying that, like it means they can spew shit at me and expect me to leave it unanswered. God, you're a selfish bitch. And you, asshole. I wish I'd never met you, Al. I walked over to the wall of guitars, looking for a place to lean against, to think, to come to my senses. I saw Derek tense up. I don't know anything about guitars, but I do know what a collector's item looks like in a place that takes pride. There was a guitar in the center of the wall, signed with a dozen names I didn't know, next to a numbered 37 100ths card. It looked expensive. Expensive. Irreplaceable. I took it off the wall, and Derek started to get up. He yelled, Dude, wait! But I had already lifted him over my head with both hands and swung at his neck like an axe trying to cut a hole in the floor. His neck shattered into pieces and his body shattered into a dozen shards. His mouth hung open. Did that make me feel better? A little. But there was a whole wall of those damn things waiting for me. I expected him to scream, yell, howl like a child. But he surprised me. He picked up a small, rusty guitar from the stand next to the couch and slowly walked toward me, holding the instrument in both hands as if paying homage to it. Here, this one will be next. It's the first guitar I bought myself after high school. I played it until I could afford something better. The one you broke was my rarest, but this one means the most to me. He bowed his head. Break them all if necessary. But please, 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 don't hurt Ellie. Take her back. Let her have her fairy tale again. He expected me to feel remorse, that this would be a great romantic sacrifice for her, but it only made me angrier. You asshole! He looked up. What? Assholes like you think love is about grand gestures. Songwriting, ostentatious displays of affection, big dates and the like. And that matters. The big things matter. But the little things matter more. I brought the chipped guitar fingerboard up to his chin and tilted his head so that he was looking into my eyes. Ellie tensed on the couch. When was the last time you brought a girl chicken soup when she was sick? Made sure you paid a bill she forgot without making her feel like shit about it? How about making sure she always had a roof over her head and food on the table? Rubbing her feet when she had a rough day, not because you hoped to entertain her afterward, but just because she needed it? Huh, asshole? He was silent. That's what love is. That's what love is in a marriage. It's dependability, trust, respect. Sometimes passion. You try to maintain that. I thought we were succeeding at that. Apparently not. I turned to Ellie again. But I guess we didn't have anything at all, huh? Maybe that asshole got it right. Maybe it was all about figuring out how many girls you could drive crazy by being the most peaceful. Because our marriage wasn't like any of those, even from the beginning. She said, "It's not respect, Ellie. Can you say you respected me? Having sex with your ex behind my back? Dependability? Well, you could rely on me, but I certainly couldn't rely on you and trust." I shook my head. Yeah, I can see where this is going. I lowered my neck and started to walk away. She cried, "What about the baby?" I turned and looked at both of them. Seeing them together, him standing and her sitting, I understood. I realized they were telling the truth. She was going to confess to me, because she had to. Ellie and I were mirror images of each other. Tall and broad, short and petite, but both pale and blonde. Different eye color, but close enough in appearance to be cousins. Derek had olive skin, black as coal curly hair, and eyes a tone lighter. My voice blazed with cold fury. "You never would have told me if you hadn't gotten pregnant." She moved awkwardly. "You never would have told me if Derek looked like us. If you could hide what you did, you'd have done the same thing Gloria did to Dawn. You'd be a cuckold, a real cuckold, letting me raise someone else's child." I looked at Derek. "Which one of you realized you had to tell me?" He looked down, then at Ellie. I nodded. "Well, I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." She looked at me with fury. "What did you just say?" "You slept with me. You were going to make me raise someone else's child." I pulled my wallet out of my pants and pulled out 2 20s, then walked over to the table across from her and placed them on the table. "Here, find a dealer. Then you can be just like Gloria." I couldn't have hurt her more if I'd done it physically. She opened her mouth to moan, but didn't make a sound. She knew. She knew I was right. She had become the monster of her childhood. She would never be the person her father had raised her to be because there was too much of her mother in her. Because Don let Gloria get away with his cruelty under the guise of being a good husband. But I wasn't her father, and I wasn't going to save her. Her fairy tale was over and she deserved it. I turned and started to walk away. I felt Derek's hand on my shoulder, her black knight trying to stand up for her where her white knight had failed. "Dude, you can't talk to—" I turned around and drove my fist right into his face. Martial arts was a thing of the past, and I hadn't practiced in years, but I could still throw a simple punch. He fell backwards and I kicked him in the side, my thick boots bruising him and possibly breaking a rib. He rested his hand on the ground, trying to get up, and I saw red. He stole my dream from me. Now I'm going to get it back. I lifted my foot and brought it down with all my might, once, twice, 3 times. I heard the bones crack and break under the final blow of my unspent youth. He screamed in pain and disbelief, his arm mangled almost beyond recognition. I spat on him. We weren't even, but it was the closest we'd gotten. Ellie was by his side before I even made it to the door. Of course she was next to him. Of course she took his side again. I was just her husband. She was screaming, "Why, Tim? How can you be so cruel?" I only shook my head as I opened the door. "You're an inspiration to me, Ellie. I think you're my muse, too." Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.